Robert Plank Show, episode 77. How and why I create my podcast, and how you too can get your own online radio show listed on iTunes. I want to personally welcome you back to the Robert Plank Show. This is the internet marketing podcast where we talk about webinars, membership sites, traffic, making money, coaching, a lot of fun stuff. And today we're going to talk about making a podcast. You need to have a podcast. That's why you're listening to me right now. And let me just get a couple things out of the way. The reason why I have a podcast, well, first of all, is for fun. Another reason why I have a podcast is because there are a lot of thoughts in my head and little things that don't quite fit into any kind of product. And then the big reason why I have it is because I want to get some traffic. And I guess if I were to throw in a number 4 reason, it's also because I want to impress anyone I come across. So if someone searched your name on Google, what would they find? If they search your name on iTunes, what would they find? And maybe you already are on iTunes because you hopped onto someone else's podcast show. Maybe you are on Amazon because you knew that in order to get a Kindle book published, all you really have to do is upload a Word document and fill out a form that tells Amazon what title you want your book to be and what price you want your book to be, and then maybe you can toss in a book cover, but other than that, that's all it takes to get a book on Amazon. By the way, if you want to see that in action, go to makeaproduct.com, and that is our course on how to get your book written in 56 to 58 minutes or less, and published onto Amazon Kindle, which is their digital bookstore, and Amazon CreateSpace, which is their physical bookstore. I'll show you exactly how I do it. But anyway, this episode isn't about Amazon, it's about podcasting. And so the next thing about podcasting that's really good is that you can double dip. And I've had my own blog, robertplank.com, for a bunch of years now, and writing is hard. Writing takes a long time. There's all this research that shows like the ideal length of a blog post is about 2,000 words these days. 2,000 words, man. I mean, if you think about it, that's like, 8 pages or something like that? That's quite a lot of work to put in and week out. And for the longest time, I only published a blog post on my own blog, robertplank.com, once a month. Why? Because I wanted to stay relevant. I wanted it to be a site that people would always go to. And I mean, every time I look at my current stats, I look at who's online now, there's at least a handful of people on my blog, robertplank.com. So podcasting is really great because you create your own internet radio show. It appears on iTunes, but it also appears on your blog. And we're going to break down the actual technical steps in order to getting a podcast online. But you have a blog, and we use WordPress for that. You register some form of yourname.com. So if yourname.com is taken, maybe yournamemarketing.com or yournamerealestate or whatever niche you're in, you grab that. You install a WordPress blog on that, so you can start posting and you can type things, or you can place YouTube videos or interesting links you found on your home on the internet. You'd be surprised at how many internet marketers who have a bunch of products and have a list and things like that don't even have their name.com or some version of that. And if you even go there, they don't even have a blog there. So you have a blog, and then a podcast means that you can post blog posts that have an audio component to it. And then once you submit that blog to iTunes or in places like Stitcher one time, then someone can search iTunes and find everything that you've posted on your audio form of your blog. And you can still have a blog and you still post things that don't show up in the podcast feed, is what it's called. But now you can dip into this new traffic source where iTunes has a ranking of the hot podcasts and new and noteworthy, and people can subscribe. There's lots of cool stuff, and we're going to unpack that and talk about podcasting on today's episode. As we get ramped up, I have a quick question for you. What's your hook? So a hook is this thing in copywriting, if you've never heard of it. It's basically like the intangible, or it's the thing that draws people in, okay? And I didn't think too much about a hook early on, and it hurt me because I thought, okay, what do? I can show people how to program PHP web pages. Well, big deal. Who cares? I can show people how to increase the conversion rates on their sales letter. Well, still, who cares? But if I can sex that up a little bit and say, well, I can show you how to make a sales letter and an opt-in page in 5 minutes by clicking around. I can give you a tool to do that. I can give you a one-button solution to clone one WordPress site into as many WordPress sites as you want. I can show you a tool called websiteremote.com where you can remotely manage 10, 50, or 100 or 1,000 WordPress websites, including client sites. So I want you to think about that in terms of what your hook is. Because, I mean, if you say, well, I sell all kinds of stuff. I sell to people with money. That's nothing, right? That doesn't mean anything. Or if I sell to young people, I sell to old people, that still doesn't mean much. But then if you say, well, your niche is the stock market or real estate or WordPress, now you're narrowing down what your niche is, right? And then you say, well, now what is my solution? What is my product, membership site, course, book, coaching program, whatever? And then once you have that, now you look at what everyone else is doing and you do a better job of drawing people in and finding a better, faster, cooler, more fun, more effective way to get the job done. People aren't just buying your book or buying your course, they're buying a solution to whatever problem they have. So if you can tap into that and if you can say, well, you have this problem everyone has, and here's the solution. Maybe the solution is getting a landing page. You look at what's the current crappy solution that everyone accepts, and maybe it's just that, well, in order to get a decent landing page you have to pay $60 a month and you have to learn all these extra tools and it takes about a month anyway and you have to hire someone anyway just to figure out what the heck you're making. Or I can say that's the alternatives, but then I can give you this $7 plugin that'll do it in a few minutes, and you click a button and it's all done, and boom, you don't have to even learn a lot or spend a lot of money or spend a lot of time. It's all done for you. And we don't necessarily want to just compete on price or just compete on the time you save, but factor all those components in. Price, time, cost, difficulty versus ease of use, all that stuff. All right. So think about that this week. What's your hook? And if you have a hook, could it be better? Could you have a better one? Or if you already have a hook for an existing book or course and you have a new book or course, then what is the new hook for that? The thing that draws people in and makes the thing you're talking about news. Because it's one thing to sell something to someone and say, look, here's my WordPress backup plugin. But if you can put a spin on it and you have a way of positioning it as something that's brand new, that's news, then in a way you're teaching somebody something, you're educating them something, while at the same time kind of sneaking in the selling that you're doing. And along those lines, let's talk about the catchphrase of the week. Catchphrase of the week is to teach long division and sell the calculator. I don't know who invented this term. I didn't. But this is a selling term, which basically means that, well, if you're trying to find a new clever way to sell or pitch something, and you don't, and you need to have something to say, just want to say buy my stuff, well then show them the hard way, show somebody the way to solve a problem without your product. So we were talking earlier about landing pages and paper template. And I could show somebody how to make a landing page from scratch. I could show somebody how to open up a text editor or open up whatever the current version of front page is, or how to learn fonts and CSS and colors and images and how to format stuff and how to make your own images. I could show somebody all that, and they might actually get something out of that. And they might actually say, okay, well, I'm going to learn the hard way from you. And maybe if I can't even afford the $7 or the $47 for papertemplate.com, I'll pick that up and I'll kind of slap something together. And usually, by seeing the long division problem solving, they'll either like convince themselves on their own to buy from you, or they'll go out and try the hard way, which will work, but they'll realize that it's so much work that they wasted a couple days trying to make something from scratch when they could have just paid you $7, pushed the button, and it was done. So we teach long division, sell the calculator. And this is going to help you solve or answer the age-old question of, well, how much of my stuff do I give away for free? And the answer is as much as you possibly can. If you want to get noticed, share a bunch of cool, good stuff on your blog. Share a bunch of good stuff on message boards, on YouTube, on your podcast. I post to my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/phprobert, and then this show, which is robertplankshow.com/iTunes, all the time. And I can talk all day long about membership sites, WordPress, backups, plugins, stuff like that. But what good is it unless you have the actual plugin I'm talking about? Or what good is it unless you see what I'm talking about here? So the podcast is a lot about like the strategy or what you should be doing or what you should be doing differently and what you might have forgot about, things like that. But in order to actually get some real results, I want you to buy one of my courses. If you want to know webinars, join webinarcrusher.com. If you want to know podcasts, join podcastcrusher.com, and I'll share as much as I possibly can with you in this audio format. But seriously, the best place to take advantage of my training, and if you want to get a podcast done today and do it right, you join me at podcastcrusher.com. That's podcastcrusher.com. And the quote of the week is, don't make the mistake of doing nothing just because you can't do everything. We don't know who said that, but he said, don't make the mistake of doing nothing just because you can't do everything. There's all kinds of possibilities out there on the internet, right? Should you podcast? Should you do affiliate marketing? Should you do email marketing? Should you do CPA? Should you do eBay stuff? Should you play around on Fiverr? Well, you do need to have some variety in your life and some amount of chaos, but you don't want to be spread too thin, and the average marketer really is spread too thin. They go and they post to Vine, they post to Instagram, they post to Pinterest, they post to Twitter, they post to their blog, they do so-called research, they buy a bunch of books, they play around on Amazon Kindle, and you should for sure have multiple streams of income, but I really don't think you shouldn't be spread around more than 2 or 3 projects, to be honest. And you should have a business that works in such a way that if during, say, like a Tuesday or a Wednesday, during one particular day, if you had to shut down the whole entire world and focus on getting that book done, and done doesn't mean perfect, done means good enough where it's finished to some extent. But if you had to shut away the world and just focus on finishing one thing that day, that is a business and a lifestyle you should have. You can't get yourself to the point where you're putting out fires all day long, because you'll never get anywhere that way. You won't grow, and eventually you'll get burned out and go backwards, and we don't want that. Don't make the mistake of doing nothing just because you can't do everything. That will help so many internet marketers, and I hope you as well. And as we're getting ramped up here, the marketer of the week is a guy where I don't even know where he's gone. I think he's still on Facebook. I see him every now and then, but I don't know what happened to his websites or his products, but he has some good things to say, and his name was Jordan Hall. And he had a lot of really cool things that he used to play around with, and the thing that sticks out in my mind was he was the first person I ever saw to sell an all-in-one membership site solution. And I think he even hosted it. And this was back in the day when if you wanted to have a membership site, you'd have to go, I guess you still kind of do. You'd have to go over and register with a payment processor. And then you had to go and install a WordPress blog. And then you had to install a database and some other membership plugin. And you had to connect WordPress to your membership plugin. And then you'd have to install another add-on to take payments from your shopping cart. And then if you wanted to have an autoresponder, which of course you need to have that, you'd have to register an autoresponder, and you have to buy yet another plugin to connect it together. And there were literally all kinds of sites you could join for a monthly fee, of course, that would show you all the files you had to edit. And literally some of these sites would just say, okay, well, what you're going to have to do is once you have your membership plugin set up, you're going to have to open up this one file and go to line 117 and remove what's there and add this in. And like literally, I wasted weeks just duct taping it all together. And that's the phrase that stands out from this guy Jordan Hall, which I mean, he might even have been gone for like 5-10 years at least. But the phrase duct taped is what sticks out in my head because I remember he had some kind of video where he just talked about his all-in-one membership solution. And I wish I knew what happened to that guy, but he basically just made this video explaining what I'm just explaining to you, that all these different solutions had to be duct taped together. Now think about this. Doesn't me mentioning this little story about Jordan Hall tie in with, first of all, your hook? Doesn't it tie in with teaching long division and selling the calculator? Doesn't it tie in with not making the mistake of doing nothing because you can't do everything? So just think about that in terms of, do you have an all-in-one solution, or is everything kind of scattered? Are you spread too thin, or can you focus on just one thing and get it knocked out? Because I mean, having some amount of activity will decrease your stress, but what's better is to complete a few things. You'd actually get somewhere and you'll get that sense of accomplishment. I don't know if you've ever heard of the advice where you're supposed to, or like I think some Marine gave a TED talk, and I haven't seen the TED talk, but I always hear it talked about. But some guy teaches to make your bed in the first thing in the morning when you first get out of bed. And the reason for this is because, well, at least if everything else goes to crap that day, at least you got one thing completed that day. And the idea is you wake up, you make your bed, and then you get momentum to complete other things throughout the day. And they've done studies on stuff like this where just making your bed in the morning improves everything else in your day afterwards. All right, let's talk about podcasting. Now, podcasting means that you put on a headset or talk into a microphone. I really prefer the headset I'm talking into right now. It's called a Logitech H390, and it costs $25. It's not the most fancy microphone out there, but for the price, the quality is pretty dang good. I know that if you bought a $200, actually I do have a $200 microphone, and I'm looking at it right now in the closet, and I have another $200 microphone. I'm looking at it behind me in a box and some stuff I'm cleaning out. But I've played around with all these microphones, and there's a couple of problems I have with expensive microphones. First of all, a lot of them aren't USB, right? And so the headset I'm talking to you right now is USB. I plug it in, I just go. The next thing is that because it's a headset, it is just the right length away from my mouth, and if I turn or I sit back or lean forward, you still hear me exactly the same. And I mean, a lot of the things that I do, I'm not concerned about quality that much. If I want to record a video, I'll just record a video. I'm not going to spend a month getting the shot lit just right and getting it professionally produced or stuff like that. And the big problem that I see also when it comes to audio recording is that people really geek out and people really go down the rabbit hole to the point where they say, well, you've got to bolt this big arm to your desk, and you got to have a thing that hangs down, you got to have a pop screen, you got to have this amp and a preamp and all these connectors. And then these guys that teach for you to buy $3,000 worth of audio equipment, I listen and I hear the hair buzzing in the background, or I hear the guy smoking, or I hear the guy breathing, and I'm thinking, so you have all this fancy equipment, but you don't have all the levels right, so what good is fancy equipment if it sounds even worse than a $25 USB headset? And don't get me wrong, I'm not a cheapskate. I've bought at least 10 of these headsets because about once a year, either I step on one or it breaks on its own or the cat chews it up or something, but podcastcrusher.com/headset is the Logitech H390 headset that we use. So what you want to do is literally record anything. Okay, literally, I mean, talk about yourself, but if you can only talk for 5 minutes, that's great. Just one 5-minute episode will get you a podcast. And I'm thinking about how much information I want to give away to you today. Let me just say it. When I plan out podcasts, I'm going for a 3x3 solution. Okay, and if you want to write this down, this is probably the most crucial part of today's training. You want to let me write down the word problem, okay, and then let me leave some space below that. Let me write down the word solution, and then leave space below that, and then the word case study. And every time I'm putting together a podcast, I think in terms of these three sections, okay? And what I want to do is, and I mean, in the podcast, there's like the build up to the main feature, main attraction. You can do that if you want or skip that. And right now we're in the main attraction. And I'm going to write down underneath the term problem a number 1, number 2, number 3. Underneath solution, 1, 2, 3. Underneath case study, 1, 2, 3. So problem area, we're going to list 3 bullet points. Solution area, we're going to list 3 bullet points, and then case study, we're going to list 3 bullet points. And so what I do is if I'm really stuck about a cool podcast episode idea, I'll list these things, and then I'll kind of set it aside, and then I'll come back and record the episode I want to record, and usually I'll add to it or beef it up so that it doesn't always follow this format. But right now we're talking about podcasting, right? And what we want to talk about in the problem, let's talk about content marketing for problem number 1. Problem number 2 is fleshing out ideas. Let me write that one down. And then problem number 3 is stay in the mind of the prospect. I'm not just going to write the word prospect. Don't you hate that when people write just really sloppy notes and then even they don't know what they wrote, right? Okay, so problem, we're going to talk about content marketing, fleshing out ideas, staying in the mind of the prospect. Now for the solution, let me say soft sell, and maybe I'll say comma URL dropping, and then I'll say content muscle is number 2 for solution, and the number 3 is the presentation muscle. Okay, and you don't have to know what that means, but I sure as heck do, and I'll mention that when I get to that part of the section. And then as far as case study, I'll say equipment off the top of my head, the blank or the Your Name show, let me just call it that, and then finally iTunes traffic. All right, so now without even hardly thinking about it, I've listed 9 talking points or bullet points, and if I end up talking about each of those for 5 minutes, then that's going to be a 45-minute podcast. And if you're new and you wanted to talk about each of those bullet points for a minute or two, that's a very easy way to make a 10 to 20 minute podcast. Okay? So what I just did was I created these 3 sections, and one is to set up a problem, one is to reveal your solution, and then the final section is to talk about the case study where you implemented that solution to solve that problem. And I mean, if you have a better way or you have a better system or way of organizing your podcast, well, that's great. Use whatever you like. But if you find yourself ever getting stuck, I don't know if there's such thing as podcaster's block, because there's writer's block. I don't know if there's podcaster's block, but this would be the way that I would get you out of podcaster's block, is list 3 talking points about a problem. In this case, it's podcasting. 3 talking points about a solution, and then 3 bullet points about a case study where you solve that and you get into the real details. And so I don't care or think too much about how long each of these sections are. But what I would tell you is to go about 5 minutes per section. That way you get a nice action-packed 15-minute episode. Now we're already kind of screwed up with this podcast episode because we led in with question, catchphrase, quote of the week, marketer of the week, and I explained what I was about to do. So I mean, we're probably going to breeze through the problem, solution, and case study about podcasting. But I hope that maybe you're going to have to listen to me creating that outline after I talk with you today about podcasting, and maybe it'll make sense. But let's talk about podcasting. So we said earlier that, I like to have a blog that I update. I like to have books on Kindle. And the point of all this is this thing called content marketing, where if someone searches the term webinars, I'm going to have all kinds of search results. If someone searches my name, those are all kinds of search results. And even if someone doesn't even search, but they come to my site, or they're ready to buy something from me, and they're not sure, and they're doing their research on me, they're going to find all kinds of stuff about me, such as a book, such as a blog, such as a podcast. And hey, you know what's also really cool is Well, first of all, with this content marketing stuff, 80% of the game is just showing up and being consistent. All the stuff where people say you have to put out, X number of posts per week, or they say to spend 20% of your time making content and 80% of your time marketing. I mean, I guess that makes sense, but I don't want you to spend all month making one blog post and then wonder what the heck happened. So you have to keep churning stuff out there, and you have to stay current, and you have to stay relevant because, like I said, Jordan Hall, where the heck is he? I don't know. I search his name, look on his Facebook. I don't know what he sells or what he does, if he's still in internet marketing or not. And people will forget you. And that's what I don't want to happen with me, because a big chunk of my income are all these accidental sales, all these buyers that I don't even know where they come from, because it might have been from an article I wrote 5 years ago or a podcast I put out 6 years ago. Who knows? But you have to do enough stuff where you hit that critical mass and get all those accidental sales. And the whole point I was trying to make when I started this paragraph or this sentence was that you can get your podcast transcribed, and now you have all kinds of little reports, or you have content you can play around with and put into Kindle books. And okay, so content marketing is a good part of it, but this leads me to the next really helpful part of podcasting, is that it helps you to flesh out ideas. Because have you noticed that that really famous, either celebrities or business people or whoever, some of them have some pretty catchy catchphrases, right? Or things that they say. And I want you to have those things too. And I want you to present your ideas in the best possible way. And the way you're going to get there is to present those ideas repeatedly. And so you kind of figure out the best way to put something, or figure out your 5 or 7 step system. And for me, I used to speak on stage pretty regularly, not as much as I wanted to, and I don't as much anymore. But I still want to stay. I want to stay in shape, basically, and I still want to have good things to say. And right now, I have 10 books on Amazon, and I want to have a lot more. So I use podcasting to flesh out my ideas. And that's not to say that, when I record a podcast episode, that content is going to show up in a book or something like that. But there's no law saying I can't talk about stuff about podcasting on a podcast, or talk about Amazon publishing on a podcast episode, and then kind of figure out the best way for me to say something, and then that goes in my book. You can totally repeat yourself if you want. So content marketing used to be tough, because it always is tough, and it's only going to get more competitive. But you used to have to write stuff. Well, now you can record stuff. And then getting your catchphrases or getting your content figured out, well, that's easy too, because you just talk. It's just like talking on the phone. And if you think about it, especially if you're in business or internet marketing or whatever, haven't you had some really good Skype conversations or phone conversations, and after you were done talking, you were like, man, I wish I recorded that. Well, guess what? Now this is your time to make something that you're glad you recorded. And then the other problem that we have, like we said, is staying relevant, and not just staying relevant where people will listen to you, but staying in the mind of your prospect, so that not only will they start listening to you, but they'll continue listening to you, and they'll actually listen to you enough and long enough where they will buy from you, and they'll listen to what you have to buy. And just putting out all this stuff, and webinars are good for this too, but it helps to know why the heck somebody would ever buy a WordPress cloning plugin. Why the heck someone would ever buy a landing page plugin. And some of the, copywriting tells us to sell the sizzle, not the steak, right? And it says don't focus on how many megabytes or how many megapixels, but focus on the kind of things they can create with your tool. And that's all good, but then there's a little bit of some buyers are looking for some very specific things. Like, haven't you ever gone and bought a car or bought a house, and you knew that there were like 4 bullet points of what you wanted, and you knew that if one of the bullet points wasn't there, then it doesn't matter how great the car or the house was, you weren't going to compromise. And so sometimes we'll have people that they want a landing page that's mobile responsive, which means that when you go to a web page on your iPhone or your mobile phone, it looks okay on the phone, right? It fills up the whole screen on the phone with giant text. And some people don't even know what that means, but they keep hearing from everyone else, from all the other marketing, that they should have a mobile responsive landing page. So that's one of those little things where I'm not going to focus on it the whole entire presentation, but if I talk about our paper template landing page plugin, I'll make sure that I mention that they are mobile responsive. That way, for those people who are looking with that or that four bulleted list, they will get a mobile responsive landing page plugin. All right, so podcasting. What you do is you, like we said, we record episodes, and it's good to record on a regular basis, whatever that means to you. Weekly is good, monthly is good, daily, you might get burned out, to be honest. But we want you to talk about some of the things in your business. And, you can have a podcast episode, you can have one podcast episode about every one of your products. Or maybe look back on your blog about something you used to have a position on years ago that you forgot about and started doing again. Make a podcast episode about what you've been doing differently in the last 7 to 30 days. And so we can have, and the most, I would say that the coolest podcast episode you could do, and maybe this could be your very first episode if you don't yet have a podcast. So you join podcastcrusher.com and you record a 5 to 10 minute episode explaining how you got started, why you're different, and how people can find you. Okay? Why you got started, how you're different, and then where people can find you. And what I want you to get good at is soft selling and URL dropping, which means that, it's tough to pitch really hard on a podcast. You can't spend 30 minutes explaining all the components of your offer, but you should mention a bunch of your different websites if it comes up. And I've mentioned at least 5 of my websites, if not 10, today so far in today's podcast. If I say you should have a book on Amazon, I say go to makeaproduct.com. If I say you should run webinars, go to webinarcrusher.com, and so on. So this is a great way for those people who are looking for the answer to end up buying from you. Because if you think about it, you don't always know where people found you. They might have been looking for some free webinar training and they found you through YouTube or your podcast or your blog or something. And then once they're there, well, if you can help them and talk about webinars or podcasting or a book on a podcast episode, great. But if you just left them hanging and said, okay, here's a couple things about podcasting webinars, see you later, tune in next time, it's like, well, no, I wanted to know if you knew a little bit about what you were talking about. And I wanted maybe a little bit of strategy. And I wanted to know the big picture or the next couple steps. And now that I've got that, now I want the whole entire thing. So get good at offhandedly mentioning your websites, but please keep the URLs short. Okay, please just mention whatever.com. Don't say, well, you got to go to podcastcrusher.com/go/?P=8525. Well, no, just say podcastcrusher.com. There you go. Easy to remember. You can go there. Spell it out maybe. Next, for the why podcasting is great and how and why I do it is I like to keep the content muscle strong. And what that means is that if you haven't written any words or anything in the past year, it's going to be really hard to eke out a sentence. And luckily in this day and age, because there's Facebook and texting, you keep that writing muscle strong. But you should also be writing blog posts, articles, and maybe even products and things like that. You should be writing stuff. You really should. And even if you don't have time to write stuff or you're a bad writer, no one's that bad of a talker. And even if you are, you can get better with practice. I don't like the term practice because practice sounds like you're just playing around. But you understand what I'm saying. And this is why the term muscle is better than the term practice. Because, well, if you go to, you go to the gym and you work out every day and you get some muscles, well, you didn't really practice because you got a result out of all that exercise. So if you can continuously put out some kind of content. And I mean, what could be fun is to record some kind of explainer video, some kind of a tutorial, some kind of a YouTube video showing something that you do on the computer. That would be useful, and it would only take you 5 or 10 minutes a day or a week. You put it on there, link to it, and then it doesn't really matter if people view it or not, and people can. And a lot of the videos I have on YouTube are long term, and I'm playing the long game, and over a few years some of my videos have racked up 10, 20,000 views that I definitely couldn't have gotten that in a day or two, but over time it was the video provided a solution to things people were looking for. So you have to keep that content muscle strong, because if you are used to putting out content on a consistent basis, it becomes a heck of a lot easier to write, to speak, and that means when it comes time to hop on a bunch of podcast interviews to get some traffic, make some guest blog posts, pitch on a webinar, it's a lot easier. And that leads me to, there's the content muscle and then also the presentation muscle. So the way that I think about like presenting as opposed to just talking is that when you're presenting, there's some kind of a structure, right? Like even in today's episode, I created this structure right in front of you, and then now I'm just checking off the boxes and fulfilling it for you. And the reason, so when you do a presentation, you have some kind of a structure, any kind of structure, and it helps so much because you can explain to somebody what you're about to talk about, right? Because earlier we said, well, we're going to talk about how and why I make my own podcast. We're going to talk about the strategy of it and how to make the content and then the tools to do it. And then I'm just walking you through that. And after I explain that to you, I can go back and recap the structure. And now we're really get cemented and hammered in your head on how to do this thing. So we're not just kind of talking or making stuff up. There's an actual end goal that we are together going towards, which is you having a podcast. And it helps to think on your feet, kind of like how I listed up some bullet points, or it helps to just get good at that kind of teaching style where you know you're not going to go forever, but you need to arrange things in a way where you get all the stuff that needs to be said out there, but kind of in like a time compacted format, and it's all like logical, but there's also some chaos in there so we can have fun and kind of ad lib a little bit, right? Because we don't want to script out every single word of our podcast or our webinar and then read it like a little robot. We have our talking points to keep us on track, to keep us moving, and then we just kind of ad lib and make sure that, okay, if I have more to say about the presentation muscle, I'll keep going. If not, wrap it up, move on to the next thing. Speaking of, let's get to the meat of this and talk about how you are going to record this podcast. Like I said, if you're stuck, then talk for 5 to 10 minutes about why you got started, how you're different, how people can find you. The equipment that I use is, first of all, the most important piece is this $25 USB headset. I think they even sell it at Walmart. But what you want to get is a headset where, first of all, it's a headset, sits on your head, plugs into the USB port of your computer. That way you don't have to get all this extra equipment to deal with all the audio, noise, and power and whatever. And you want one that actually plugs in. You don't want the ones that are wireless, because then you have to charge the battery and it doesn't sound as good. Just get the $25 Logitech H390 headset at podcastcrusher.com/headset. That's how you record it. And how about this? Even if you couldn't figure out any of the technical stuff we're about to talk about today, just get some stuff recorded and then find someone later that you can hire to get it made into a podcast. Or even better, get your virtual assistant to join podcastcrusher.com, and he or she can see and do the steps to do it. So what's most important is to record some stuff. So we have that headset. And then you record, I believe the tool we show in Podcast Crusher is Goldwave, Goldwave. And when more recently, we use Audacity, Audacity. And the reason for that is because Audacity works on Mac and PC, and it's the most widely used. But either one of these is almost identical. When you click the record button, start talking. Now, don't even worry just yet about music or any of that fancy stuff, or even editing it. Don't care if you cough or sneeze on the recording. It's your first episode. It's okay. So you use the Logitech USB headset, you record it, and then in Podcast Crusher, we show you how to properly tag the audio, and you can put your picture on the episode or put your album cover or whatever, so that way when people play it on their podcast device, they actually see your logo or see your picture. And then we use a service called Libsyn, that's Libsyn, and that's $7 a month to host the files of your podcast. You don't want to host your files on your own web server because it'll be too slow. You don't want to host your podcasting files on Amazon S3 because if you then get 1 million subscribers, your bill will be through the roof. Libsyn is great because they are a podcast hosting service and you only pay for the storage. You don't pay for the internet connection, the bandwidth, the usage. You only pay for the ability to publish a set amount of content every month. And then in Podcast Crusher, we show you how to install and use a plugin for WordPress called PowerPress. So you either use an existing old blog you have or set up a new one, and then underneath your regular blog post, okay, wait, let me back up. You create a new blog post, right? You're familiar with this concept where you make a new journal entry, put in a title, put in the contents, choose a category, published. When you make a podcast episode, you still have a title. That becomes the title of what appears in iTunes and stuff like that. You still have text and content, and these are what's called show notes. These are like the bullet points, the talking points of your podcast. And heck, if you later on you want to put a transcript in there, great, but your show notes are more or less the bullet points from your podcast. And then using this, because this PowerPress plugin is installed, you paste, I should say, the web address to listen to your audio portion of that episode. And somehow magically PowerPress combines it all together where you make a post, title, show notes, audio file. And then what's cool about this is now if someone visits your website, someone visits your blog post from a web browser, they'll see a normal blog and they'll see some normal bullet points and they'll see an audio player where they can listen to your episode right there from their computer. If they find you on iTunes on their tablet or their smartphone, and they either searched for you or they're subscribed to you, they see the title of whatever that episode is, they can click a button and play the episode right then and there, but while they're playing, they can also read your show notes, your bullet points, your transcript, whatever you have in there, and that is PowerPress. So Podcast Crusher is really all about combining a few tools together. The Logitech headset, Audacity, tagging, Libsyn, and PowerPress. And then the setup, the structure for your podcast is, well, first of all, it needs a name. And I would recommend that the name is Your Name Show, like the Robert Plank Show. If you have an existing brand or kind of a clever name, you can do that too. So I almost called my podcast the Double Agent Marketing Podcast. And you know what? If I had unlimited time, I would have some podcasts named after some of my products, and you should too. So whatever you have to sell, what if you had a podcast called the same thing? So and what if you also had, out of your best stuff in the podcast, a book with that same name? Well, now you kind of have this brand that's all working together. So for your first episode, just make it 5 minutes, and then worry later about having the music or the artwork or having longer form content or having interviews or even getting to the point where how about this? What if in the future, once you get good at podcasting, you get that content and presentation muscle at a point where you want it? Maybe in the future, you can just sit down and have one single prompt, one single question, one single idea, and you spit out 20 minutes of that. That's the dream. That saves you so much typing and thinking. You just say what's on your mind. And then once you have all that stuff set up, you have the audio recorded, you have the podcast posted, then you submit your podcasting feed, and this is just a special link, and we'll show you this in the course. Submit your podcasting feed to iTunes, to the Google Play Store so that Android devices can find it, to Stitcher, to different podcasting directories, and then you even send your list and your social media about it, and then this becomes like an ongoing thing, kind of like a TV show. So every week you come out with a new podcast episode and you put it on your blog, and now all these people subscribe to it, then get the latest episode, and then you tell your list about it, you tell social media about it, and then it all builds from there. And suddenly you are a content marketer. You went from being a person who doesn't have a book, doesn't have a blog, or maybe the blog is old and outdated, and now you can just record a 5-minute or a 15-minute little blurb every week, and then suddenly you have a podcast, just like the Robert Plank Show has had 77 episodes so far, including this one, which are winding down, so I might as well just say that we have a grand total of 77 episodes in the bag. Now, if I was to start over with my podcast, or if I could go back in time to when I first made it, I would podcast more frequently and I would podcast shorter episodes. Easy for me to say right now, we're approaching 46 minutes. So starting out again, I would have launched the podcast with 3 to 5 10, 15-minute episodes. As a listener to different podcasts, I really prefer like 20, 30 minutes. I'm not sorry I go over time, but sometimes I do go over time. And I would definitely, if I were starting over, I would post once or twice a week, and I would buy more advertising and things like that for the podcast just to make it grow faster. But to be honest, when I first started podcasting, I was kind of bored. I wanted to do something differently, and I always felt bad because I didn't update my blog very often. And for the past 7 or 8 months now of the Robert Plank Show, we have updated every week. And the biggest help for that is to have a content piggy bank. So I will record not too far ahead, but I'll record a few weeks ahead of time, a few episodes ahead of time. That way I have this bank of podcast episodes that I can just pull from. So that way I'm not scrambling on the day of like a overdue homework assignment to get the podcast figured out. But you don't have to be fancy. I'm talking to you on a $25 headset. What's more important than the quality or the sound of your podcast is that you have good stuff to say, you do it consistently, and you send people back to your websites, and you send people back to places where they can buy from you. And so if this all sounded good and you say, okay, well, this is great, I got lots of cool little things, but I want the whole complete system, I want to see it in action, well, you're in luck, because our course at podcastcrusher.com shows us setting up a brand new podcast from scratch, a brand new show from scratch that we still update every week, and it's called the Lance Tomashiro Show. My business partner Lance Tomashiro has his own podcast as well, and you should too. Because you have a podcast, that means that you have this extra traffic source from Google, from iTunes, from all the apps, from all the phones. It means you update your blog more often. It means you become a better speaker, a better marketer. It means you flesh out your ideas. It means you have content for your future books. You get your ideas down pat. I mean, there's so many benefits for you making a podcast that you should have made one yesterday. It's okay though. The next best thing from yesterday is today. So join us at podcastcrusher.com. That's podcastcrusher.com to make your own podcast. And while you're at it, while you're on that internet web browser, also go to robertplankshow.com/iTunes. Go there, and if you're not yet subscribed to us, subscribe. If you haven't yet rated us, give us a 5-star rating and type just even one sentence saying what you liked about me, the show, this episode, whatever. It would help us so much to rise in the rankings on iTunes. So I'm Robert Plank from the robertplankshow.com. That was episode 77, how and why I create my podcast, and how you can too. Let me try again. How and why I create my podcast, and how you too can get your own online radio show listed on iTunes. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just messed up. You can say What's more important is you have good content to share. So join us at podcastcrusher.com and then email me at robert at robertplank.com and tell me where your podcast is so I can subscribe, rate, and review that thing and give you a boost in your rankings and your traffic. I'm Robert Plank from podcastcrusher.com. Have a great day and thank you.